My name is Graham Thomas, and this is my presentation of my analysis of Alaska Air Group Incorporated. The airline industry is a highly competitive industry and is subject to various uncertainties including economic conditions, fluctuating fuel prices, a unionized labor force, the necessity to finance large capital, government regulations, and potential aircraft incidents. Airlines also have high fixed costs for wages, aircraft fuel, aircraft ownership, and facility rent. In recent decades, many airliners have merged together in order to survive in this ultra-competitive market. Alaska Airlines is no different from its competitors. It suffers from these same issues. The biggest factor of the external environment that is currently affecting Alaska Airlines is political in nature. In 2006, the Boeing Company, the largest manufacturer of commercial jetliners in the world, announced plans to build a modern jetliner that was capable of improving fuel burning and operating efficiencies, which had a major appeal to traditional airliners who were struggling to cope with the ever-increasing cost of fuel and ticket prices. At the end of 2015, after several years of designing and testing the prototype, Boeing started to mass produce and market its 737 MAX jet to potential buyers. It did not take long for airlines, including Alaska Air, to realize the potential economic benefit of having this modern jet in their fleet. By early 2018, the 737 MAX jet had become the fastest selling plane in Boeing's history, with over 100 different airlines worldwide entering into purchase agreements for more than 5,000 of these planes, which cost $121.6 million each. However, the hype around the jet soon plummeted in October 2018 when a MAX jet operated by Lion Air anti-stall safety feature repeatedly failed and forced the plane into a fatal nosedive. The pilots aboard were unable to correct the nosedive, and 181 passengers died on board as a result. In March 2019, the same malfunction killed 149 passengers on board a flight operated by Ethiopian Air. After this second fatal crash, aviation authorities around the world grounded all Boeing 737 jets until the cause of the crashes could be investigated and properly corrected. American airlines are regulated by three separate agencies: the Department of Transportation, or DOT, the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, and the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. Each agency has different responsibilities regarding commercial aviation, but the FAA is the agency responsible for regulating airline operations. Although the FAA initially decided against grounding the jet, the agency eventually could not avoid the political pressure and decided to ground all Boeing 737 MAX jets in April 2019. Although Alaska Air currently does not have any of the Boeing 737 MAX jets operating in its fleet, the company entered into a purchase agreement for 50 of these jets in 2015. 32 of these jets are scheduled to be delivered to Alaska Air in June 2019. If Boeing, a supplier, cannot prove to the FAA government that it has resolved and corrected the fatal issue from occurring before the pending delivery to Alaska Air, the company may be forced to sit on over $3 billion in assets during the summer season, which is the busiest travel season of the year. I believe Alaska Air should pursue a legal strategy to delay payment to Boeing until the issue is completely resolved. Another external threat that Alaska Airlines currently faces is the price and availability of jet fuel. For those who are not familiar with the composition of jet fuel, when crude oil is refined, it can be manipulated in several different ways to meet the requirements of its intended user. After its initial refinement, jet fuel is infused with kerosene to alter the boiling point because of the high altitude and low pressure that an aircraft experiences at its particular cruising altitude. There are three main types of jet fuel: Jet A1, Jet A, and Jet B. Jet A1 is the standard grade for international commercial flights. Jet A is the standard grade for domestic commercial flights. And Jet B is the standard grade for private flights. Since Alaska Air primarily operates on the western seaboard of North America, its primary consumption of jet fuel is Jet A. The price of crude oil constantly fluctuates due to several factors such as availability and distribution expenses. During a 2-year period from 2014 to 2016, Alaska Air experienced a $50 fluctuation in the cost of crude oil barrels. During this period, the price of crude oil peaked at $93 per barrel. The slightest fluctuation in crude oil prices can have a serious impact on airlines' expenses. However, airlines still need to account for the cost of refining crude oil to jet fuel grade. During a 5-year period from 2013 to 2018, Alaska Air experienced a refined cost fluctuation ranging from $13 per barrel to $24 per barrel. Although this refinement cost does not fluctuate as much as crude oil prices do, it can still have a significant impact on a company's operations. For example, a 1% increase in the price of crude oil or refinement can cost an airliner $8 million in annual expenses, which can be detrimental to a company's operations. Jet fuel only accounts for 10% of the United States refinery yield. However, the daily consumption of jet fuel is expected to continue to rise over the next few decades. This trend will inevitably lead to increased jet fuel costs. With the price and availability of jet fuel outside its control, Alaska Air needs to find effective ways to keep their fuel costs down, while also making it last longer. One way the company can do this is by ensuring that flights are near full capacity. Alaska Air needs to ensure that its booking practices and flight patterns correlate with this effort. Alaska Air also needs to invent in modern jets that maximize fuel efficiency. Yes, I concede that the practice will increase short-term debt obligations, a current threat that the company is already dealing with. But in the long run, purchasing fuel efficiency jets will help keep fuel prices down. The biggest factor of the internal environment that is currently affecting Alaska Airlines is human resource in nature. During my analysis of the company's performance, I found something that might be politically incorrect to criticize, but is a problem that is ultimately hurting Alaska's bottom line, so I felt obligated to reveal it in my analysis of the company. The problem I'm referring to is unionization. In an industry that is already experiencing relatively low profit margins, being an industry that is also heavily unionized hurts profit margins even more for airliners. In 2017, 49.3% of workers in the airline industry were union members, and 51.6% were covered by collective bargaining agreements. For those who are not familiar with the term, a labor union is an organized group of workers who unite to make decisions about conditions affecting their work. However, unionization affects the airline industry differently than other industries, mainly due to its density. As previously mentioned, in 2017, 49.3% of workers in the airline industry were union members. Contrastingly, in 2017, only 7.4% of workers in the private sector were unionized. This significant difference has a positive impact on the negotiating power of airline employees. As a result, labor costs, which includes wages and benefits, are typically the largest expense that airlines incur on an annual basis. The case is no different for Alaska Air Group. As of December 31st, 2018, Alaska Air employed 23,376 full-time employees and part-time workers. Labor unions represent 84% of Alaska's workforce. In total, labor costs accounted for an astonishing 41% of the company's total non-fuel operating expenses. I believe Alaska Air has strengthened its employees due to its exceptional customer satisfaction rating, and they should be treated as such. But the industry already is volatile to changes in the market, A decrease in revenue of any kind could lead to diminishing earnings. Furthermore, Alaska Air is currently cash strapped due to the Virgin America acquisition in 2016. The merger cost the company $2.6 billion, the majority of which was financed by new debt. Not only did they take on new debt, but Alaska Air also took on a 15.1% increase in new wage and benefit expenses from keeping on former Virgin American employees, totaling $284 million. If Alaska Air should need to liquidate in the next few years for whatever reason, even though the company is fairly healthy financially right now, they could face a difficult time. When collective bargaining agreements start expiring in the next few years, Alaska Air might be wise to bring the workers to the negotiating table to discuss options to help their liquidity. Negotiations could include lowering current wage expenses in exchange for increased retirement benefits. The company could also benefit by employing temporary workers during the summer season, which is the busiest travel season. Employing temporary workers could lower wage expense because temporary workers are typically protected by labor unions. Another factor of the internal environment that is currently affecting Alaska Airlines is financial in nature. As previously mentioned, when Alaska Air acquired Virgin America for $2.6 billion in 2016, the company financed the acquisition largely by taking on new debt. Although the company has since paid down its long-term debt to $1.6 billion, it still has a significant debt obligation to creditors. I'm concerned that this debt obligation will prevent Alaska Air from pursuing capital expenditures in the foreseeable future. Another reason I'm concerned is because Alaska Air will have to allocate operating cash flows to pay debt obligations, which will reduce the company's available funds to stay relevant in this ultra-competitive market. Although I believe the company's partners should have never pursued this acquisition, it is vital that Alaska Air finds disposable assets it can liquidate to stay relevant.